I swear, if you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. Dad's voice cracked through the walls like a rifle shot. I stood frozen on the stairs, heart hammering in my chest, clutching the banister as Jake stood there. Backpack slung over one shoulder, dripping from the rain he'd just come in from. His jaw was set. His eyes were glassy. But he didn't flinch. You mean that? He asked, voice low, dangerously calm. Dad didn't respond. He didn't have to. The silence was loud enough. Jake let out a breath, then shook his head. I can't live in this house anymore. Not with you pretending everything's fine when it's not. Not when I'm drowning and you just keep handing me bricks. He yanked open the front door and disappeared into the storm, leaving behind nothing but mud, wind, and that awful hollow space where his presence used to be. I was 13 when Jake left. Mom had died 6 months earlier. One minute she was on her way to pick up groceries, and the next, a car accident. Some drunk guy ran a red light. Just like that, she was gone. It broke us, but we each broke in different ways. Dad shut down completely. He became this cold, mechanical version of himself. Up at 5, work all day at the plant, dinner in silence, then sit in front of the TV pretending to watch baseball but never reacting. He didn't cry at the funeral. He didn't say her name again. It was like he thought if he held himself still enough, the pain couldn't find him. Jake, on the other hand, became noise. He slammed doors, skipped class, came home smelling like weed. He'd sit at the dinner table in silence, then suddenly start yelling about how no one cared what he was feeling. One night, he punched a hole in his bedroom wall. Another time, he stole Dad's truck keys just to drive to Cleveland with a friend and disappeared for 2 days. They fought constantly, screamed at each other like they were trying to shatter the house just so someone would finally hear the hurt inside. Jake didn't hate Dad. He hated the silence. He hated that every time he reached out, even if it was clumsy or loud or angry, Dad shut the door a little more. I tried to stay out of the way. I was the quiet one, the observer. I'd sit at the dinner table and watch two men who loved each other too much to say it, tearing each other apart because grief doesn't come with instructions. The night Jake left, it was raining hard. He had just gotten into another fight with Dad, this time about dropping out of school. Jake had been skipping classes, and when the counselor called, Dad flipped, accused him of giving up on his future, of being selfish, of shaming the family. Jake yelled back that none of it mattered, that Mom was gone, and none of the rules or grades or lectures were going to bring her back. I'm not her, Jake said, voice shaking, and neither are you. So stop pretending like if we just keep acting normal, she's going to walk through that door again. Dad slapped the table so hard his coffee mug shattered on the floor, and Jake left. He didn't pack much, just grabbed his hoodie, his phone, and whatever money he'd stashed away. I watched him from the stairwell as he disappeared through the door, the rain swallowing him whole. He didn't call, didn't text, no letters, nothing. For 6 years, Jake was a ghost that haunted the edges of our lives. Dad never spoke his name again. He boxed up Jake's room within a week, as if sealing it shut would keep the pain from leaking out. He told neighbors Jake was traveling, like he'd gone off on some brave adventure and not been driven away by the suffocating weight of grief. I wanted to hate Dad for it, but deep down I knew he was hurting too, just stuck in a different kind of prison than Jake. Still, I carried my own anger that neither of them could bend, that I was left in the wreckage of two people too proud to admit they needed each other. Sometimes, at night, I'd sneak into Jake's old room, lie on the floor, stare at the ceiling and pretend he was still there. I kept a journal hidden under my bed, filled with letters I wrote to him but never sent. Dear Jake, one read, come home, please. I don't care what happened. I just miss you. But the letters stayed unread. The silence stayed unbroken, and the storm never really left. 6 years. That's how long it had been. I was home from college on fall break, stacking firewood behind the house when I heard someone knock at the front door. It was an odd sound, hesitant, almost unsure. 3 light taps. I walked around front, expecting maybe a delivery or a neighbor needing help. I opened the door, and my heart stopped. Jake, thinner, paler. His beard was patchy, and dark circles under his eyes made him look older than 24. But it was him, and for a moment, I felt 13 again, standing on those same stairs, watching him walk out into the rain. "Hey," he said, voice rough and low. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, trying to process it. "Can I come in?" he asked, eyes flicking toward the house behind me. I nodded and stepped aside. Dad was in the kitchen washing out his coffee mug. He turned at the sound of the door and froze, the ceramic cup still in his hand. Jake met his eyes. "It's been a while." Dad put the mug down, slow and stiff. His face didn't change, but his hands trembled. "You look," he began, then stopped. Jake gave a hollow smile. "Like crap." "Yeah, I know. I've got cancer. Stage 4. There it was. No warm greetings. No hugging reunion. Just a death sentence dropped in the foyer. Dad blinked, but didn't react. His jaw clenched. "How long?" "Doctors say 3 to 6 months. Maybe less." For a second, I thought Dad might yell. Or cry. Or tell him to leave again. But instead, he said nothing. Just turned away and walked into the garage. Jake let out a breath. Well, that went better than I expected. I wanted to scream at both of them for wasting so much time. But instead, I helped Jake upstairs, set him up in the guest room, my old room now. He dropped his bag on the floor and sank onto the bed like his body was already giving up. Over the next few days, things were strange. Dad didn't speak to Jake unless necessary. He cooked breakfast, made coffee, left it on the counter without a word. Jake said thank you once, but got no response. The walls between them were still thick. But something shifted one evening when the Browns were playing. I walked in to find the two of them silently watching the game on TV. Neither spoke, but they didn't leave the room either. Later, I found Jake sitting alone in the garage, staring at Dad's toolbox. "I used to sneak in here when I was little," he said. "I'd steal his wrenches and pretend to fix my bike." He never said a word, but one day he bought me my own little set. That was his way of saying he noticed. He smiled at the memory, then sighed. "I always thought Dad didn't love me, but maybe he just never knew how to show it." We were still a broken family, but for the first time in years, all the pieces were finally in the same room. And maybe, just maybe, there was still time to put some of them back together. You could feel it in the air, something shifting. Not fast, not dramatic, just a slow unthawing, like the first day of spring after a brutal winter. Still cold, but different. Jake had been home for nearly 3 weeks. His color was worse, and his cough had gotten deeper. The meds helped him sleep, but left him groggy. Some days he barely got out of bed. Other days he forced himself outside, claiming he needed to feel the sun before it got too cold. Dad still didn't say much, but I caught him once, standing in Jake's doorway watching him sleep. He didn't know I saw. He just stood there, arms crossed, shoulders heavy like he was carrying the weight of 1,000 unsaid things. The tension finally snapped one morning over something stupid. Pancakes. I was in the kitchen flipping a batch when Jake came in, pale but determined. He asked for chocolate chips. Dad walked in just then and said sharply, "You're not a kid anymore, Jake. You can't eat like you've got your whole life ahead of you." I froze, spatula in midair. Jake stiffened. "Oh, I'm sorry." Jake shot back, voice ice cold. "Forgot I was supposed to die with dignity. Plain pancakes only." Dad set his coffee mug down hard. "I didn't mean..." "You never do," Jake cut in. "That's kind of the problem, isn't it?" Dad's fists clenched, and for a moment I thought they were going to explode again. But this time Dad surprised me. His voice dropped, softer than I'd heard in years. "I'm scared, Jake." Jake blinked. "I'm scared you'll die, and I'll never get to fix any of it," Dad said. "I don't know how to say the right things. I didn't when your mom died, and I sure as hell didn't when you left." I just froze, and I've been frozen ever since. The room fell silent. Jake stared at him, jaw tight. "Why didn't you ever call me?" Dad's eyes glistened. "Because I thought you hated me, and because I didn't think I deserved to hear your voice again." For the first time in years, Jake's shoulders slumped. Not in anger, but in exhaustion. He looked smaller somehow. I didn't hate you, he said quietly. I just didn't know how to survive in that house without Mom. Dad walked over and pulled out a chair, sat down across from Jake. I didn't either, he whispered. That morning was the turning point. From then on, the house changed. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. Jake and Dad started spending more time together. They worked on the old Ford in the garage, Jake holding the flashlight while Dad crawled under the chassis. I'd hear them talking about old camping trips, favorite songs, even high school memories. Not big moments, just quiet threads being rewoven. One afternoon, Jake knocked on my door holding 2 baseball gloves. Catch, he said. We tossed the ball back and forth in the backyard like we used to as kids. The leaves were turning gold and red around us, the crisp air biting at our cheeks. Jake caught the ball one-handed, then grinned. Remember that summer I tried out for Little League and struck out 5 times in a row? Yeah, I laughed. And you still told people you were team captain. Fake it till you make it, he said, panting slightly. Then he caught the ball again and held it. You know, coming back wasn't easy, but I'm glad I did. Even if I don't have much time left. I swallowed hard. You have enough. He nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe just enough. Later that week, we had a small family Thanksgiving, even though it was only mid-October. Jake's idea. He wanted one last real holiday. As he put it, he wore Mom's old cardigan, the one that still smelled faintly of lavender. Dad cooked the turkey. I made the mashed potatoes. We lit candles and played a scratchy vinyl of Sinatra from the living room stereo. After dinner, Jake stood and raised a glass. To second chances, he said. To ordinary days, and the people who never stop showing up, even when they don't know how. Dad raised his glass too, and for the first time in forever, I saw him smile, really smile. The next morning, Jake was too tired to get out of bed. He passed away quietly. No dramatic last words. No struggle. Just a peaceful breath. And then stillness. Dad and I were both there, one on each side of the bed, his hand in ours, his face calm. He was only 24. The funeral was small. Jake didn't want a crowd, just the people who mattered. We held it under a tree in the local cemetery, where Mom was buried. Dad stood beside me, wearing the same suit he'd worn to Mom's funeral, though it hung looser on him now. I gave the eulogy. I talked about Jake's fire, his stubbornness, his laugh that could fill a room. I told them about how he came home not to die, but to live, to make things right. And then I told them what he'd left behind. A week after the funeral, I found a letter taped to the back of my closet door. Open this when you need to remember. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten note. Some things are too big for words, so I recorded them instead. I plugged it into my laptop. There he was, sitting on the back porch, hoodie pulled tight, camera slightly tilted. Hey, Eli. If you're seeing this, I guess I'm not around anymore. But I wanted you to know I wasn't afraid at the end. Not really, because I had you, and Dad. We weren't perfect, but we were real, and that was enough. He smiled. Tell people that real is enough, that you can mess up, walk away, lose years, and still come back and be loved. And when you have your own family someday, tell them to fight for each other. Always. I listened to that video 100 times, and when I got married 2 years later, I carried that flash drive in my pocket. During my vows, I quoted him, Jake, you can mess up, lose years, and still come back and be loved. Dad cried that day, not hiding it, not ashamed. And when our son was born a year later, we named him Jacob. Not to mourn the brother we lost, but to honor the man we found again, just in time. Some people measure a life in years, but I've learned the truest measure is how deeply you're remembered and how bravely you loved, even when it hurt.